So settle into a nice position for meditation. And giving our thinking minds a big thank you for all the work they do in our day-to-day lives. And they can just sit down for the next few minutes. Finding some connection with the breath. Finding some connection in the body. And now I invite you to bring up a memory of someone you pretty much only have pleasant feelings about, and someone you have not seen in quite a few years, quite a long time, and someone who you do not have any plans to see. So this is all one person. One person you feel pleasant feelings about, who you have not seen in quite a long time. And maybe it's an old neighbor from somewhere you used to live, an old classmate. For me, it's a teacher from college, maybe a dentist. And maybe you, just by thinking of this person, already feel some pleasant sensation in the mind, maybe also in the body. Or maybe it would really help to bring up some more specific memories of pleasant interactions with that person. Something kind or helpful that they once said to you. Some way that they showed you love, or you showed them love, or both. And maybe after a few minutes of this reflection, maybe there's some pleasant feeling in the mind, maybe some pleasant feeling in the body. And now you can let go of those memories of that person, those memories of those pleasant exchanges, and just hold that pleasantness in the mind. Hold that pleasantness in the body. Maybe taking stock of what exactly that feels like. Maybe some tingling on the skin, some warmth, like there's a cozy little bonfire that you're sitting in front of. And now, in your mind, while you stay fully embodied in this pleasant sensation, you stay with it in the body. You can also, in your mind, take a tiny step back, and a tiny step upward. And also just observe that pleasantness. And if this is making any sense to you, then congratulations. I think you just might be feeling your feelings, witnessing your feelings, holding them lightly. And maybe you still feel that pleasant sensation in your body. Maybe it's on your skin, still warm. And maybe at the same time, you also feel the bliss of watching it as an observer. And I'm thinking this bliss of observing that sensation is Nibbana here and now. See how deeply you can sink into that bliss. Know that while we practiced holding a pleasant feeling today, you can do the exact same thing with an unpleasant feeling. And the exact same thing with a neutral feeling. Every time a feeling arises, we can choose. We can get sucked up into it, or we can practice. Enjoying the last few breaths in this meditation. And maybe taking a couple deeper breaths to bring yourself out. And let's bring this meditation to a close. I mentioned once a few months ago that I think it's really important to listen to multiple arhants because sometimes they say things that, at least at first listen, they seem to contradict each other. But if you kind of investigate it further, it can really shine a light on the Dhamma when you juxtapose their teachings and help us understand in ways that, at least for me, are deeper and make more sense and really add fuel to my practice. So one example of this is Ajahn Ganha had told one of the monks, you know, you need to be careful if you work closely with me, because if you have a kind thought or if you act toward me in a kind deed, in a kind way, like it really exponentially multiplies the merit you make, versus if you have an unkind thought or an unkind deed toward me, it also multiplies the not so desirable karma that can happen. I mean, maybe you'll have to pay for many, many lifetimes after this one. Yikes! That sounds very scary to me. Versus when I was listening to a Dhamma chat with Ajahn Suchart, somebody asked him, Ajahn Suchart, you know, in the suttas, it says that if you make a dana offering to a once returner, it is 100 times more powerful than a stream enter, than to give the same offering to a stream enter. And if you give an offering to a non-returner, it's 100 times more powerful than offering it to a once returner. And if you give an offering to an arahant, it's 100 times more powerful than giving it to a non-returner. So why is that? And in his sometimes spicy way, which I enjoy watching, he said, that's not true. If you give an offering to someone who has a deeper practice, then it means that you're most likely going to go watch a Dhamma talk from them right after the offering, right after alms round. And because their wisdom is much deeper, then you're probably going to benefit much deeper, and you're going to get a much deeper understanding of the Dhamma, and you'll be able to have much faster progress toward Nibbana. That is the highest happiness of all. So of course, if you make an offering to someone with deeper practice, then you will be much happier and you'll have less suffering. And I thought, I really like that. And then when I contrast Ajahn Suchart and Ajahn Ganha's teachings, I think there is not necessarily actually any contradiction. They're just teaching it in different ways. Because when I think of how Ajahn Ganha or the Buddha taught about the effects of making dana offerings and how it can really exponentially make a difference in the merit that we make depending on who we give the offering to, it really reminds me of when I was a kid and my mother decided that in order to reinforce positive behavior, she set up this scoreboard basically. And anytime she saw me doing something that she thought was really great, she would put a sticker on the scoreboard next to my name. And if I got 10 stickers, then I got to pick out a toy next time we went to the store. So it kind of has that feeling for me. And it makes a lot of sense to me why the Buddha would teach it in that way. Because as I understand it, you know, I don't think I was around at the time and place of the Buddha. But as I understand it, a lot of the people he was teaching were not highly educated. So to say like, hey, if you give an offering to someone who has deeper practice and deeper wisdom, you score 100 times more points. I think that's a really effective way of teaching people who maybe don't have like a really high understanding of cause and effect, of just how psychology works in a human being. And I think the way that Ajahn Sutar was teaching it is more sensitive to people who just understand psychology, how understands how when we listen to deeper teachings, and of course it's going to move us and move our hearts and help us awaken in a deeper way. Yeah, and so today we're talking about karma and the effects of making karma, of making merit. And I think before we go any deeper, it will be beneficial to define the terms as I'm going to use them today. Because I've heard some people get really technical and really nerdy about karma, about karma. And I don't follow all those conversations. And to me, when people get extremely, extremely technical, it doesn't help my practice. So that's one reason why my brain just doesn't follow those conversations. So for the purposes of today's talk, when I talk about making merit and I talk about good karma, I just mean things that happen that make people happier. And the ultimate way of making good karma and of making merit is to practice as deeply as we can, right? Because if we practice as deeply as we can, then we can get to the highest happiness as soon as possible, maybe even in this lifetime. Versus, making not so happy karma and making not so desirable merit. I just really mean things that lead to undesirable results and just things that slow our progress on the way to Nibbana. So I think talking about how we act around arahants can be a really useful way to illustrate, I think, the psychology and just the cause and effect that we can observe with a material view of the world. And even not around arahants, like I think it's really easy to observe when there's a big group of people who convene. Like when I was a high school teacher, I could really see groups of similar, not just interests, but similar degree of how wholesome they are, really band together in the classrooms and form groups of friendships. And another example I love to give is when I worked in the film industry, there's many, many departments within a film crew. And you can get to the point. I never got to this point, but a lot of people told me that they got to this point after many years in the film industry where they could take one glance at somebody who was a professional crew person and just tell what department they were in. And people of similar energy just seemed to really draw together. And people, it makes sense because people of a similar energy would be attracted to that discipline within filmmaking. And then that discipline would also draw out more of that personality trait. So, for example, I worked a lot in the camera crew, and camera people tend to be very meticulous, and you just have to be if you want to work with the camera. And then as you work within that discipline, of course, how meticulous the craft is going to amplify my meticulousness. And yeah, it can get to the point where just one glance at someone and you can tell what department they're in. And I think that's a great way of showing how karma can work, how our choices can really inform where we go in life, and then how that place in life can really also further inform who we become as people. And then, there's like varying degrees of. There were some people in some departments of film crews and some people in certain groups of friends in high schools who I just thought they seemed much happier as people. People with, when I was teaching high school, like there were people who just had more wholesome interests in school and out of school. People who had more stable foundation in sila, ethical conduct. And to me, they did seem happier. And to me, it seemed like if they ever picked up Dhamma practice, that they would have an easier time understanding it and a swifter path to enlightenment. So that's like some very worldly examples. And then when it comes to accepting teachings from arahants, from all the books that I've read, from all the Dhamma chats that I've watched online, I've also seen that when people are really sincere and wanting to practice, it really seems like the Dhamma just flows through the Kruba Ajahn. And they not only answer the Dhamma questions, but they, especially a lot of them, but I can really see like Ajahn Suchart asking these really tender questions about people's health, about their family, and it's really sweet, not just to hear the teaching, like about the suttas and about the Dhamma, but really sweet to witness how they care. Versus sometimes people go on those chats and they seem very excited to give a 5-minute lecture on the suttas as they see it, or a 5-minute lecture on Buddhist history. And I'm just watching this person give Ajahn Suchart a 5-minute lecture, and I'm like, oh my gosh, why are they doing that? And there's this sense of, I'm not in their mind, but it could easily be interpreted as someone who has like a really large sense of self in that moment, at least. Someone who thinks they know better. Yikes. Um, and that kind of, in Ajahn Mun's biography, it was called a conceit. I think I've also heard people describe it as a kind of arrogance. It's also really interesting to watch how Ajahn Suchart responds to that, because he actually doesn't really respond at all. Whatever he's feeling in his mind, he just looks totally neutral on his face. And this one time I'm remembering very clearly right now, he just kind of waited for it to stop. And then he was like, okay, thank you for your commentary. Let's move on to the next question. And he didn't respond to it really, besides what I just said. And there was no opportunity to teach that person because that person has so much hubris, at least it seems. And in the biography of Ajahn Mun, if I'm remembering correctly, Ajahn Mahabua described how, for most audiences, Ajahn Mun could just speak and speak and speak about the Dhamma, and it would just flow like water coming out of a tap. But sometimes there would be an audience where a lot of people had that arrogance and that sense of conceit, that sense of knowing better. And he would just basically just sit there and stare, and nothing would come out of the tap. And so then we could say, like, someone who has very sincere approach to the teaching, to wanting to hear from the Arahant, they would benefit enormously, if their heart is open to that wisdom. Versus someone who has a lot of arrogance, then they would not be benefiting at all. And I think when we talk about bad karma and bad merit, undesirable merit, I think a lot of it comes down to two things. One, it's like in that moment, you're really reinforcing your sense of self to come with that arrogance to someone who is just so humble and trying to help. And then two, you're missing out. You're really missing out on what could be an opportunity to change your life for the better and to really expedite one's journey toward nibbana in this very life. So I think personally, when we talk about bad karma, it's really those two things. It's a huge reinforcement of a sense of self and missing out on what could be so much better than that sense of self. So I think when we talk about like some people who think it's like okay to kill even household pests. So I think there's this reinforcement of that little grain of, I don't know if it's hatred or delusion or both, but that little grain of delusion that says it's okay to kill. Like you'll get off scot-free if you kill this small pest. And if there's many ways to describe nibbana, but I think one way is that the heart is totally unguarded and totally open and free. And to think in that way would really prohibit and inhibit that heart from opening all the way. And I think to think that any life is not worthy of care, and not just worthy inherently, that all life is just inherently worthy. I think that is part of having a really unguarded heart, to see all life as worthy. And to think that a household pest is dispensable really contradicts that. And to think that there is a judgment of life from worthy to unworthy then places our own lives as people somewhere on that scale as well, and makes it necessary to guard and protect our own lives, even in just this teeny tiny grain of sand kind of way. And for someone to think that, it really makes them miss out on how beautiful and free and soft and open the heart can be. Anyway, just what I think. And we can also apply this to medically assisted suicide, which some people call dying with dignity, death with dignity. But I recently watched a documentary that had some footage of someone undergoing this process, and there are some really undignified sounds that come out of the person's body when that happens. And I don't think it's an accurate way of naming that process. But yeah, for someone to go through this process, which I can definitely understand, because gosh, the body can be really painful and unpleasant sometimes. And I can understand that people may not want to burden the people that they love and who would be taking care of them. And I think for someone to choose that would really be reinforcing the idea that a life is only worth living if it's pleasant, or a life is only worth living if it has some kind of productive output, or life is only worth living if it doesn't bother others. And I think there's a lot of missing out on the really amazing lessons that can be learned of how to sit with pain, how to accept help, and many others. And I've also heard from a friend who I believe to be quite far along the path, who has had some vision of their past lives, and who has confided in me that they believe they actually entered the stream in the moment of their death in a past life. And it was in the letting go of that life in that body that they experienced stream entry. And in a life that was quite pleasant and not perfect, but quite pleasant and quite happy and had a lot of joy, he said that actually the best part of that whole life was in that moment of death and in that moment of stream entry. And that it was only possible because the mind was aware in that moment. So for someone to take a morphine cocktail at the end of their life, they would be missing out. And I'm definitely not promising that if you die with a sober mind, you will enter the stream. That is not the promise here. And in fact, I think if someone were like, oh, it's definitely going to happen for me, then I think it definitely will not happen. But it could, it might, especially if that person has practiced well in their life and has kept a really strong practice of sila and has heard a lot of wise teachings, then I think it's definitely possible. But that's just what I think. And it's really up to each of us to discern what is wise and what is right. So I think like 90% of karma and making karma can be understood with just a material view of the world and just seeing how there is a cause and effect and how certain decisions will create a more wholesome, happy mind. And of course, the more wholesome and happy our mind is, then the more easily we can sink into samadhi and the more closely we can look at all corners of our mind. And I think that if we want to go all the way, then actually, this was in Ajahn Mun's biography too. He said something like, if you know the mind completely, then that is another way of describing Nibbana. And that is absolutely not a direct quote. I did not memorize it. So it would be great if you want to read the whole biography and find out for yourself, because then you will have read his biography. All right. I do think 10% of karma and making merit, though, can not be understood with a material view alone. And there is some higher power, some higher force, whether it's the devas or something else, I don't know. But I'll give you an example. So I have this friend who I ride in the car with a lot. And there's just this tendency when I ride with this person that even in an extremely crowded parking lot that is crawling with cars, hunting for spots, not every single time, but a lot of the time, uh, there will be a car that just pulls out right in front of us and we can just slide right in. And it happens a lot with this person when she's with me. And one day I just kind of looked at her and I was like, you're like really good luck with parking. It's like whenever you're in the car, we find spots so easily. And she just gives me this look. She's like, you are not the first person to say that. And actually, every person I've been in a relationship with has said that to me. And she's like, I don't know if this is the reason or not, but I really do my best to be aware of my surroundings and to make way for other people, whether it's like in a really crowded shopping mall, in a grocery store aisle. I really try to just tuck my stuff out of the way and make sure people can pass by me. And also not just physically, but emotionally and socially. Whenever I'm in a crowd and I can see that someone is feeling a little left out, I really try and include them and make it easy for them to enter the group. And I don't know if this is the reason, but I really try to make way for other people in life. And maybe this is the universe's way of making way for me. She was like, it's also not just parking spaces, but also when I fly, when there's really horrible weather and it is in the news about how many delays there are and canceled flights there are at the airport, I will, not every single time, but an eerie amount of time, I will show up at the airport and on the board where it says all the flights, it will say canceled, 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 delayed, 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 all the way up to my flight. And my flight will say on time. And she kind of just giggled to me. She said, hee 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 hee. And yeah, this can be, by the way, a really great reason if you have Dhamma friends to meet them in person. And there's just some things that people will say in person in more intimate friendships that people will not say on a Zoom chat. So this is also a really fun way to find stories like this. It's getting to know deep practitioners in real life. Yeah, so there's just like also 10% of the way karma works that I think cannot be understood by a material view alone. And I think this is also true of like when we hang out with the arhants in Thailand and stuff. As I understand it, there are a lot of Deva friends who like to hang out around arahants, and if we behave well, then perhaps the Devas will also take favor upon us, and if we behave mischievously, then perhaps the Devas will also wreak mischief upon us. And I'm laughing because there's a story that is coming to mind immediately that Ajahn Tilo shared with us at What's Up to We. He said, and to give it in brief, I'm sure he tells it much better than me. But he said that at one point he became really obsessed and fixated upon having the perfect alms bowl. And there was just one that was like the perfect shape, the perfect size, the perfect opening, like the perfect everything. And he was just like, yes, I love this alms bowl. And then one day he had washed it and set it outside to dry. He went indoors to take care of something else. And all of a sudden, he heard the clang and the crunch of metal. And he said that he knew in that moment, oh no, the devas are here and they are playing a trick on me. And he went outside, and sure enough, someone had, I think, driven over his alms bowl. And they were so apologetic. But he said, oh, no, 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 this is just the devas teaching me a lesson. So thank you. And apparently he got some just like very non-special generic alms bowl after that, and he has been very happy with it ever since. So yeah, also there is something greater at play that is not just the material view. And of course, there is also just an element of luck sometimes. I was listening to a Dhamma chat with Ajahn Suchart, and someone asked, like, oh, why do you think this thing happened? Or why do you think some people are born with this? And he's just like, there's also bad luck. So just keeping that in mind. I really like, I heard Ayya Jessica said to me before that even arahants, there's like this teeny tiny, even for the ones who have been enlightened for a long time, there's just this 0.0001% of like, also like maybe I'm not. Um, and just this openness and not taking it personally, not clinging to it, just being open to everything. So I think for anyone to say like, yes, I absolutely know how karma works, I would be suspicious. I would have doubts. um, and I do mean for someone to say like, I absolutely know how everything works about the whole universe. I've heard some people speak with great confidence about how some things in their life might have panned out. But what really gives me confidence in people is when they speak with true confidence, which is not clinging, not holding on too tightly. Yeah, and I would really encourage people to, I think what really colors the intention, and we've talked about this before at KBV, is the intention. That what really colors how much merit we make in a certain situation. The intention is so important. I would say is the foundation of what happens. And I think a great example of this is also like teaching. Teaching is said to make a lot of merit, make a lot of karma, and especially like when teaching the Dhamma, it's like so to the core, is like such an intimate way of talking about how people conduct themselves and how people see the world. So I say that because I think teaching the Dhamma would therefore make more karma than teaching someone how to tie their shoelaces, for example. But I want to illustrate why intention is so important. Is because, as an example, people teach for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes, and you can, especially as it become more and more confident in my own practice and developed a deeper practice, I feel like I've also been more sensitive to hearing when people are teaching because they want this, like I'm special. And this really reinforces that sense of self, because the only audience who could bear to stick around for that kind of teaching, I would say, especially the people who stick around long term, are the ones who are willing to reinforce that sense of self. So the more someone teaches in that ego puffy way, then the more their audience will also puff up their ego and reinforce that delusion. And then the more someone teaches in that way, they, I think, also really miss out on the teachings that could break them free of that illusion. And versus I think a teacher who teaches and agrees to teach because they love the practice, I think it really draws toward them people who also just really love the practice and also wish to awaken. And then I think these audiences don't really match with each other's teachers, because the people I think who just really want to develop their sila, their samadhi, their panya, I think, I think, and it is up to everybody what they think, but I think that they would not be able to bear a teacher who just wants a puppy ego. And I think the students who really resonate with the egocentric teacher would also not be able to bear listening to a teacher who's teaching because they just want deeper and deeper, because they wish to deepen their practice. That's just what I think. Yeah, so I hope that illustrates how intention can be so important. It can be just the foundation of everything we say and do and think in a situation. And so I think if we are mindful enough and loving enough in our intention, then it is possible to live in a way where we don't really have to worry about our karma, and we don't have to worry about what kind of merit we're making. Because if everything starts with right view and right intention, then the rest of the Eightfold Path unfurls from there. And even when we make a mistake, which is inevitable, we can behold that mistake in that situation as another chance to practice and another chance to love everyone, ourselves, the other person, love everyone better, and to let go better also. And that is what I offer for your consideration today. May we all practice well. And if you have anything you'd like to share, any of your own experiences with karma and making merit, I would love to hear. And also any questions, I will do my best to answer as well. Yes, Anne. Oh, you're muted, Anne.
Sorry, that doesn't work very well. Well, thank you for the talk. I really loved it. And a couple of things came up for me, but one of the things that I want to say is that I want to highly recommend listening to Clear Mountain Monastery interviewing the monk on the Walk for Peace who lost his leg. And I don't know if anybody's heard that. But I listened to that last night, and it's quite inspiring. And I'm reminded this morning of that when you spoke about essentially the pain of dying and staying with that. And he described something that I'd never actually heard before, but his object of focus was not the breathing he described, but the most throughout his life, he said the real enriching deepening focus was pain rather than breathing as a tool to learning. So I just thought that was, I mean, that's not what any of it, well, I haven't been having that or thought of that, but on the other hand, if one does have pain, it is like stay with it, but not sort of seeking it out, like here I am. So I just wanted to share that. Did anybody else hear that or listen to that? Maybe.
I
And
have not yet, but on your recommendation, I absolutely will.
yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
I see Ollie.
I thought that karma was one of the imponderables. Is that so?
Do you mean the few questions that the Buddha said, like, don't even go there because you can't understand it fully until you become enlightened?
Yeah.
I don't remember that being one of the imponderables, but Adrian has fast fingers, and I bet he can Google it really quick and let us know.
I know my own interpretation. I know my own interpretation. Yeah.
Okay.
And
I do know that there are many teachers who do teach about karma and about the effects of our actions. So, yeah. Did you want to say more?
no, that's thank you.
Okay. All right, Neil.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for the meditation. You used a phrase that I found really helpful, and I haven't been coming for several weeks now because I'm in rehearsal for a play, but I wondered if this was a phrase that had come up before or if you just invented it today when you talked about after you got to sort of a certain level of observing the feeling. You said, take a step back and take a step up. And I really liked that. It really gave me the exact sense that I think you were going for, which was to sort of really become the observer
Mm,
rather than being in it. So
mhm.
I just wanted to express my appreciation for that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, nothing that any Dhamma teacher says is original because it's all goes back to the Buddha and all the Buddhas before him, right? It's all just Dhamma, and it is inspired somewhat by I.S. Chisika encouraging people to click back and click up, which she said she got from someone else. So yeah, there's nothing original here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've never heard her use that expression, but thank you. Yeah.
Mhm. And Adrian is saying one of the imponderables is listed as the precise working out of the results of karma. So yeah, there is always that. I would really encourage everyone to just hold things lightly and just let there be a little bit of like the universe is so vast and filled with wonder and also so complicated. How can we possibly think that we know how everything works? From Anguttara Nikaya 4.77. We love a citation. Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here this morning. I so enjoy our time together, and I will see you all next time.